Hello everyone, today's video is all about my favourite agave and top recommendation if you want to grow an agave, especially in the north of England. It'll take a lot of winter wet, it's really tough and hardy, and just genuinely a really striking plant that'll grow quickly and get massive, and that is Agave montana. This one's quite a small plant here, but they're my top agave for a lot of different reasons. Firstly then, a quick look at agaves in general before I move on to why montana is such a good choice to grow in the UK. So agaves, if you're not familiar with them, they're really spiky plants, they're absolutely vicious, they're succulents, some stay small, some have got really thin leaves, some have got really big fat leaves and get absolutely massive. They could potentially get 3 to 5 metres wide, but most varieties are a good bit smaller. When it comes to growing them outdoors in the UK, there's some that aren't frost hardy at all. They literally can't take any sort of cold and you've got zero chance of getting them through winter. And for those, in reality, pot culture is the best way forward. If you keep them potted, you can keep them in a greenhouse or inside over winter and just bring them out for a bit of summer sun. However, there are others that can take the colds. You need to remember, in their natural habitats, these agaves often see a fair bit of cold, but that isn't combined with the winter wet that we have in the UK. So the main challenge is finding an agave that looks impressive, that grows well, doesn't need a huge amount of heat, but can also take a lot of winter moisture, and that's why montana is a great choice. If you live on the south coast of England, or maybe around London, somewhere that has less than average rainfall, there's potentially a few more species you can try, including the pretty common Agave americana, which gets absolutely massive. It's a really striking blue-green plant. But here up north, we generally see a lot more winter rain, and it's not just the cold temperatures these agaves can't take. You tend to see, if you're buying one this spring, the sites that sell them will only give you a single figure, like -9, which in theory is that plant's absolute limit. If it sees -8, it'll be fine. But the reality is, a lot of these plants, it just doesn't tell the full story, and it's the combination of cold mixed with the wet that actually finishes them off. They just rot through, they can't take it, and they're not designed for it. So that's why, again, Agave montana, purely because it can take that rain so well, it's just the best choice. There is a second place, which I say is Avatifolia. I have grown some of those from seed, and they do grow into the most amazing plants with huge, great big light blue leaves. You won't see anything like them here in the UK, so they're definitely my second choice. But if you've looked at Agave montana, I'll show you a few pictures now with mature ones, some pan-global plants. They are really impressive, especially when they get to about 1 metre wide. What can you do to look after that agave and give it the best chance? So firstly, if you buy an agave around this size, or grow one from seed, it'll probably take 4 or 5 years to get this size, maybe a bit quicker. If you just plant that in the ground and don't do anything, it largely depends on how cold and how wet the winters are. I have actually got one that I'll show you now that was in the ground for 2 years at our old house from a similar size to this. So this is 2 years growth from this. And it ended up like that before I moved it last summer. So they do grow pretty quickly. And what you will find is, if you grow them in the ground rather than a pot, they'll grow so much faster. So if you've got a spot for them in the ground, definitely I would do it. And probably the next lesson is, make sure you give them room to grow. I know it's really tempting when you're putting small plants in to cram them together, and whilst you can get away with the softer leaf tropical foliage plants like your bananas and cannas, when it comes to agaves, they're spiky, they're hard, they're brittle, and they're going to end up battling it out in a few years. It won't end well, so give them the space that they need, and also they just look better. I think anything with real structural form, the space around it really highlights its sort of structural presence. Now, what I would do if I was going to plant it out, which I would definitely recommend, firstly, good drainage. So use a raised bed. If you check out my last video on a few reasons why raised beds are good, it's mainly because the soil drains that much quicker. But you can also help this by adding grit to the soil. So if you can give them that good drainage at the roots, it prevents them rotting through, and it also helps prevent damage to the leaves, like the spotting that might occur, just because they're not sat in water for all the winter. So if you decide to go for an Agave montana, you've planted it somewhere with good drainage, you've maybe put it in a raised bed, what's the other thing that you can do to keep it looking absolutely pristine? And that thing is a bit of winter protection. Now, unlike plants like bananas, which are generally wrapped for winter, agaves, they're absolutely fine with the cold, or certainly the sort of temperatures that we would see in most of the UK most winters, but it's all about keeping that water out of the plant, keeping it from settling in between the leaves. Because if you think we could potentially have the 5 months of rain over winter, all that rain's going to sit in there, it's going to freeze through every time it gets cold, and it's just going to rot the plant through. There's nothing sort of hard there, it doesn't have a trunk. So the best thing you can do is keep that water out of the crown, and the main method that I see people using is building structures over the top of them. So you can use some perspex or the clear roofing sheets. You can get them from your DIY shops for about £6 for a big sheet. Something like that, raised up on 4 posts, helps keep that winter wet out, and it will keep the plants looking pristine all year round. Now, if your drainage is less than perfect, or you don't use overhead cover, personally, I know I should put one on over the plants from, say, late October, early November, through to February or March, but some years I'm just not organised enough, and you will tend to find you get a bit of browning around the edge of the leaves, or slight spots in the plant, and essentially, these little brown bits, it's where it's started to rot a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. That plant will recover, and as long as the base of the plant looks strong and green, it's just a blemish, it's a cosmetic issue, and eventually it'll just grow it out. So it's not the end of the world if you see some marks like this, but it's something to learn from the next year. Give it that overhead cover. But the crucial thing is, don't overprotect them. So the plants need that good airflow around them. They just want an overhead cover, and if you wrap them in fleece, they'll sweat, and it's that humidity that will really wipe them out quickly. They absolutely don't like it, and in some ways you're better off not protecting them all rather than going too far. So hopefully this video's helped you, especially if you live in the north of England and you like the sort of desert, arid style exotic planting, but maybe you'd assume a lot of these plants just wouldn't survive up here. They absolutely can. And like a lot of the palms and other big leaved exotics I've looked at, it's all about choosing the right varieties that can take our winter weather and also grow well in our summers. So for me, Agave montana is absolutely it. If you like growing your house plants like succulents and cacti, maybe you want to recreate that sort of vibe outside, and plants like agaves are great for that. I'll maybe combine them with Yucca rostrata, linearis, Aloe striatula. There's lots of spiky and really sort of exotic alien looking desert plants that would go absolutely great with them. But a couple of practical tips that I would end with. Firstly, don't plant them close to paths, because they do get big very quickly and they certainly bite. They will draw blood. So keep them away from paths. Maybe a raised bed out of the way is a good decision really. And secondly, don't plant them under trees, because if you get all the leaves in the crowns, it is an absolute nightmare trying to get them out, even if you've got gloves on. Again, they bite and you will bleed. So on that note, I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.